Hello again, everybody. Welcome back. So, today I wanted to express something that has been on my mind a lot. The best electricians would also be the best soldiers on the front line of a war because they have expressed an expanded sphere of awareness and an acknowledgement of the truth that a deluge could come instantaneously and hurt you severely if you're not prepared and you're not positioned in the right way. Rubber boots, etc. So it's interesting that the firmament of your consciousness is your sphere of awareness. So the firmament, in the biblical term, is it's just the sphere of awareness that artists could depict and that people were aware of at a certain point. But if you asked Christ directly, you would very likely uh, laugh at such conceptualization as a single sphere um, instead of an unwrapped sphere. Uh, Single truths can be spheres, but the entire universe isn't just a ball or anything like that. It is something far, far more complex. And it's very interesting to learn the history of when the Big Bang Theory was uh, hypothesized and who. It was actually by a Catholic who was close friends with Albert Einstein. And he used mathematics and observation and the technology and tools available to him to figure out that there was a focal point from which everything was expanding. And that's very interesting. And he probably very likely got the idea for that hypothesis from his Christian background. You know, it's very, very sad that so many Catholics have stopped reading. You know, it's very sad. It's very obvious that Catholics have stopped reading if Nick Fuentes is popular in any way, shape, or form. That is just sad. It's pathetic. But let me talk about something a little bit more dark. You know, since we're on the topic of Nick Fuentes, might as well make it dark. The instinct of abortion in women isn't just born out of indifference and contempt. It is something you see in nature, where the environment is such that it is inopportune to raise children, and so instead of sacrificing both her children and herself, she either abandons or consumes more nutrients her children and then moves to a different place to have children there. And it's very, very sad that society is such that children are being shot in schools. Really. And if we can get our police back from this stranglehold that is on them, where they are not allowed to act morally, and the hiring process is abysmal and deliberately set up so that there is as little power and structure able to be exercised by a community of people as opposed to a singular fraternity of sheriffs and sheriffs' friends in that particular area. Good old boys, they love to call themselves. And I'm from the hills of North Carolina, and I knew some very, very good people. Redneck is a wonderfully endearing term. I was proud to have a redneck. But good old boys are not good, and they're certainly not wise. It's basically the southern definition of grandmaster. And if you find yourself with a honest account of the Ku Klux Klan, you will find there is a lot of similarities between the Freemasons and that wizardry and occultism and burning of crosses. It's not something to just intimidate African American Protestants or Irish Catholics. It is indeed a tradition from the Henry VIII style meetups behind closed doors that came from the tradition of the Illuminati coming together and meeting up and deciding how they're going to conspire and undermine everybody around them, uh, including like I would not want to be part of any of these organizations because I would always be looking out for this knife coming into my back, you know? That too, Brutus? Of course. Of course. Why Christ came. Theosophy, something we talked about last time, and I missed the good missing link in Theosophy to Nazism. It's Guido von List, who is the creator of the Wotanist revival movement, pagan revival movement. Nazism is a form of neo-heathenism, which comes out of Guido von List's Ariosophy. And he looks to be one of those Tibetan Grandmaster types that has been so instrumental in allowing people selling people the shovel to dig their own grave, essentially. And it's very sad what happened to Germany, and still continues to happen to Germany, you know. We thought we were the good guys, but we instituted apartheid and cut a nation in half along lines that never existed. Separating cultures, separating families, separating people. To punish collectively a group of people that were already consistently being purged for hundreds of years by these creepy bookworms and their Knight Templar buddies, just begging to slake their blades with blood. And one of the reasons why, I've laid this out before, is the vice of the world is such that they have learned that people get horny when they're in the immediate presence of danger. Women get aroused when their man fights another man. And this is an instinctual thing that causes the will to breed to bubble up out of the baseline state. And I believe that when these Masons found this out, they have induced, you know, the sort of plain terrorizing tactics that got people stressed and stressed and stressed. And it just fed into the grander system where, you know, the Bush family was playing both sides, and, you know, the British government was in connection with the high-level Nazis and pretty friendly with them, and eventually America and England and Proto-Israel would all come together with deals, and Operation Paperclip would bring a tremendous amount of Nazi scientists into this country to the long-term detriment of our country. However, a lot of them have redeemed themselves. A lot of them have, I believe, recognized the error of their ways. And since they were allowed to come to America and see freely without the constraints of being in Germany and that hundreds and hundreds of years of genocide perpetrated by bookworms, started off with the printing press. Please come. We love you, Germans. Please come to, you know, the side of light. You know, to put it very, very simply, come to the side of truth. Don't dwell in the darkness of fantasy and lie to yourself in place of the opportunities to make things better. That is exactly how Satan undermines your life and makes the life that flashes before your eyes when you die a pallid mud of uninspiring and dishonorable quagmire, for lack of a better word, a sludge. Don't let that happen to you. One beautiful thing that happened in history is when the Spanish brought over pigs to Central America, they actually stopped the Aztec human sacrifice and cannibalism. Why? Because the Aztecs didn't want to kill themselves and eat each other. They were stuck in the Rancho, expanding the desert of the Rancho. They were stuck in a time where things were getting hotter, the global weather was changing, and unlike the people who had learned of Christ's message in the Old World, people in the New World were isolated. So any Catholic who dares to grave dance on what has happened to the Native Americans, especially the northern Native Americans that have been genocided so horrifically and dishonorably by the Freemasons, those people are probably going to hell. Like, I'm not joking. If you can say that what happened to the Native Americans is good, you are like a child abuser. Really, truly, you are like a child abuser, because they were spiritual children. They never knew any better. And when pigs were brought over, you can see like that. the blessings of Our Lady of Guadalupe allowed people to come to. It's the same with the Germans on Operation Paperclip. Like, please come to the side of truth and justice and honor. That's where it's at. Torturers are normies. Pain is a currency, but inflation is at an all-time high. You want to know about pain? Try raising a family. People who hang themselves on hooks and cut themselves and do all sorts of self-mutilation, they don't know anything about pain, actually. Try raising a family. Try raising a big family. Then you'll know about pain. The solution to the problem of integrating any manner of cultures, any number of cultures together, is to create a well-regulated democracy with multiple tiers of community action. And that can't be locked up like the Freemasonic founding fathers did between landowners. It has to spread throughout the entirety of citizenship, with citizenship being held behind a firm bar of you know the language, you understand the culture, you are not working on a sabbatical from another country. No matter if you're rich, medium level wealth, or poor, that does not afford you a citizenship in a country. You have to be willing to participate in the country. But after that, after you've proved yourself through the institution of naturalization services that used to exist before 9/11, when Bush shuttered it and replaced it with ICE, a Gestapo organization that separates children from their mothers and disappears tens of thousands of children, people always, said, who built the cages, Joe? Well, Bush built the cages, FDR, who I mixed up with LBJ because they're both, horrible, evil people who were in hell. Those are the people who build the cages for Japanese people. And ultimately, they'll put us, they'll put European descended people in those cages too. Don't ever think that they would. Just look at the jails. It's no separation. It's no difference. It's the same source. So, the institutional of naturalization services used to provide people with the ability to become Americans, and that was completely shut down after 9/11. 9/11, as everybody who has studied American history knows, has been, the sign-off point for American patriotism and the American dream. Like, Trump's not lying when he says the American dream is dead. It really is. It died after 9/11, and the fetters of it, came around with the Hummer and stuff like that, this artificial reconstruction of what people consider to be the American dream. And you can kind of see that today with, like, the gigantic trucks. People are still trying to pretend that the American dream isn't dead. In its current state, but there's a lot of work that has to be done internally for each person and their, how they act and behave and how easy they are to be taken advantage of in the international market and the domestic market. There's a lot of change that needs to be done. Like, we have been bleeding and bleeding and bleeding and bleeding for decades, and it's not a coincidence. It's due to our attitude. Speaking of attitude, I don't believe a mass majority of people are racist, even if they like to make racist jokes. They have XYZ friends, but what they do is they scapegoat cultures and they scapegoat groups of philosophies. Like, they think that the gang members are there because they choose and they're bad and yada, yada, yada. Most of the time, like a Mormon, like a person born into Islam, which is Mormonism is the white Islam. You don't know. You're born into it, like you're born into Nazi Germany. You don't know. And so, I went over and spent a lot of time on a horrifically racist website called Kiwi Farms, and I found a lot of love there. And a lot of people that I really, really enjoyed talking to. And still people that I consider friends to this day. I would love to continue talking to, but I can't. Why? The website owner is a little prick, that's why. And I wish him well, but I know for a fact that he's an enormous liar, and his memory is extremely poor. And so to expect to be successful with those metrics and not be completely carried, and To be antisocial is to prevent other people from carrying you in your times of weakness. That's not going anywhere. And it could have gone to tremendous places. Funny enough, I actually actively watched it fall into pieces. I've penned threads with millions of views on that website. But I watched lies and deceit cause him to parrot those sorts of compromising, discrediting lies that other people were feeding him. So, it is what it is. It's a very Pharisee thing to think the lack of sun damage increases the worth of you. But, you know, that's the whole thing, is Jesus did come from stock that worked in the fields and didn't build up the past around them to try and protect themselves from the future. He lived in the moment, and he lived in the moment with incredible presence and power. The xenoestrogen craze is the same as chimera speculation, and people are talking about this a lot with the new movie that came out, I Am the Immaculate Conception, and the people talking about Our Lady of Lourdes. That is all BS, and it's all meant to confuse good Christians and get them looking in the wrong direction and get them paranoid, and they'll never have answers to these questions like 5G, chimeras, ah. And of course, like, it's very easy to find out, is there any there, and then you can follow up on it. If there's no there, then why are you worrying about it? There's tons of horrible things that happen. We can list them out. We can see how they affect us. But if you're looking in the wrong place and you're blaming the wrong thing, you're falling for tricks of the enemy. Like the tricks of the alchemists when they seem to think that they can mix one animal with the other. They can't. They just straight up can't. They have not been able to do this, and they never will. The, COVID virus wasn't nearly as bad as it was in subways, because it was designed for synthesis of bat cave and human respiratory issues. So smokers and being in the subway caused it to, increase in deaths. But here in Florida, there was hardly any deaths at all. Genuinely. And DeSantis took so much credit for work that he did not do at all. He even locked down the state for a couple of months, I remember. But, it's really, really good to avoid the Roundup Ready soy, because that will dissolve the nerves connecting your spine to your brain and will give you symptoms of MS, but not MS. But, could totally grow tumors in your spine if your spine has not gotten the proper circulatory system. It's been atrophied, it's been attacked. Glyphosate is really, really bad, and you should really, really avoid consuming it or using it at all, because 98% of it ends up in the waterway, ends up raining back down, ends up getting in stuff. And since it's an herbicide, it can't be processed by plants, which are the greatest processing factories on Earth. It just continues to cause havoc and damage until it eventually degrades. And that's really, really bad. I mean, we're the best filters for herbicides on the planet, is animals. So please avoid Roundup Ready soy, but please don't fall for the xenoestrogen crap. Like, it really is, the whole chimera thing is not true. It's falling for the alchemists saying that they turned lead into gold, or that they've made lead gold. They're not the sun, okay? They can't make gold. Christ said to love God, and that gains a bridge of agape. And that is boundless, undeserving love that the Father has for all of his creation. But like an ant running towards a running faucet, if it does not recognize, if it wants to do that, it will. And God can only turn his eyes away at the last moment. People will think that God has abandoned them, but he hasn't. And if they do their due diligence and they continue on, they will find out that they were just overthinking things. Ebenezer Scrooge was a mason, and he was visited by 3 spirits. And those spirits represented either 3 wise men or Jesus, God, and the Holy Spirit. But it definitely represented a penetration of holiness into the landlord, miser, extorter that was Ebenezer Scrooge, based on the Babylonian guy Nebuchadnezzar, who burned down the Holy Land. You know, Ebenezer was a Mason, but he converted, and you can convert too. Keep that in mind. Now, racism denies free will. We went over racism a lot last episode. And every human being has the ability to choose, and to say that this race acts this way, and that race acts that way, and this race acts this way. That is to deny people their God-given free will. Now, maybe your philosophy aligns with that, but mine doesn't. I would really encourage people to look deeply into the options that they have for gaining control of their thoughts. If you love that which torments you, you gain control over it, because then you decide. You have decided. And that is a very great strength. Strength comes in gentleness, not just brutishness. That is a lower level of strength, but patience and kindness and love in the face of a storm, that is true strength. And I encourage you to have that strength. Stand tall.